Ant and Bee and the ABC. This is the story of Ant and Bee. Once upon a time, there was an ant. And once upon a time, this ant did not know there was somebody in the world called Bee. And once upon a time, this bee did not know there was somebody in the world called Ant, because once upon a time, Ant and Bee did not know about each other. This is the story of how they met. Once upon a time, Ant had a hat that was too big for him. And once upon a time, Bee had a hat that was too small for him. One day, Ant threw his hat away because it was too big for him. And one day, Bee threw his hat away because it was too small for him. And the hat that belonged to Ant and the hat that belonged to Bee whirled around in the wind till they bumped. And then Ant's hat and Bee's hat got lost together. Then Ant was sorry he had no hat, and Ant went to look for his hat. And Bee was sorry that he had no hat, so Bee went to look for his hat. While Ant and Bee were looking for their hats, Ant and Bee bumped into each other. At once, Ant liked Bee, and Bee liked Ant. Ant said Bee looked nice and yellow. Bee said Ant looked nice and red. Bee said Ant could get on to his back for a flying ride. Ant loved the flying ride. Bee loved giving Ant the ride. Ant was happy. Bee was happy. Then Ant and Bee began talking about their lost hats. Bee said he knew a place where lost things were saved and put into boxes. Ant said they must go and look in the boxes, to see if their hats were there. Lost things saved in boxes. The first box for lost things was box A. Their lost hats were not in box A. What was in box A? A lost ark, a lost apple, lost animals. The next box for lost things was box B. Their lost hats were not in box B. What was in box B? A lost book, a lost ball, a lost bed. The next box for lost things was box C. Their lost hats were not in box C. What was in box C? A lost comb, lost castle, lost cushion. The next box for lost things was box D. Their lost hats were not in box D. What was in box D? A lost doll, a lost drum, a lost donkey. The next box for lost things was box E. Their lost hats were not in box E. What was in box E? A lost elephant, and a lost elephant. The next box for lost things was box F. Their lost hats were not in box F. What was in box F? A lost fairy, lost feather, and lost frog. The next box for lost things was box G. Their lost hats were not in box G. What was in box G? A a lost giraffe, lost glasses, a lost glove. The next box for lost things was box H. The lost hats belonging to Ant and Bee were not in box H. What was in box H? Another lost hat, and a lost hat. The next box for lost things was box I. Their lost hats were not in box I. A lost iron, lost ink, lost igloo. The next box for lost things was box J. Their lost hats were not in box J. What was in box J? Lost jigsaw, lost jack in the box. The next box for lost things was box K. Their lost hats were not in box K. What was in box K? A lost kite, a lost kangaroo, a lost kettle. The next box for lost things was box L. Their lost hats were not in box L. What was in box L? A lost lamb, a lost lollipop, a lost ladder. The next box for lost things was box M. Their lost hats were not in box M. What was in box M? A lost mirror, a lost mouse, a lost medal. The next box for lost things was box N. Their lost things were not in box N. What was in box N? A lost nest, lost needles, lost necklace. The next box for lost things was box O. Their lost hats were not in box O. What was in box O? A lost orange, and a lost orange, and a lot of lost oranges. The next box for lost things was box P. Their lost hats were not in box P. What was in box P? A lost picture, a lost pin, and a lost piano. Notice what the picture is of? A lost pig. The next box for lost things was box Q. Their lost hats were not in box Q. What was in box Q? A lost queen and another lost queen. The next box for lost things was box R. Their lost hats were not in box R. What was in box R? A lost roller, lost ribbon, and a lost robot. The next box for lost things was box S. Their lost hats were not in box S. What was in box S? A lost sailor, lost scales, lost seesaw. The next box for lost things was box T. Their lost hats were not in box T. What was in box T? A lost tiger, lost trumpet, and lost train. The next box for lost things was box U. Their lost hats were not in box U. What was in box U? The next box for lost things was, lost umbrellas. The next box for lost things was box V. Their lost hats were not in box V. What was in box V? Lost violets, lost bass, and a lost violin. The next box for lost things was box W. Their lost hats were not in box W. What was in box W? A lost watch, lost washing, lost windmill. The next box for lost things was box X. Their lost hats were not in box X. Nothing was in box X. The next box for lost things was box Y. Their lost hats were not in box Y. What was in box Y? A lost yellow yacht and a lost yacht. The next box Then for lost things was box. Are you ready? Z. The lost hats were not in box Z. What was in box Z? Wow, a lost zoo. The very last box for lost things was for funny things. Funny things. All the things in the box looked funny. Suddenly, Ant and Bee saw their two lost hats. Do you see them? Ant and Bee had found their lost hats. Look at Ant and Bee. They have changed their hats. Ant's hat looked better on Bee, and Bee's hat looked better on Ant. So Ant said he would always wear Bee's hat, and Bee said he would always wear Ant's hat. And from that day, and forever and ever afterwards, Ant and Bee have been great friends.